Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, November 24th, 2020, and today we're going to be talking about the economy and the Dow Jones Industrial Market that has just jumped up to its highest point in United States history. Now, this is super important, I think, for a lot of people that are betting in markets and really were uncertain about how the future of the country would go. Following Joe Biden's transition team finally taking up this task underway with the signature or sign-off from the General Services Administration, and also the discussion of a COVID-19 vaccine have all helped the market somewhat recover from a downspike, I guess you could say, following the COVID-19 situation, the global pandemic. If we take a look actually back at March, right down here, was following, our closures, and it looked as if the economy could very well have collapsed. The Dow Jones skyrocketed downward, and it was just spiraling off into something that didn't really seem recoverable. But now, roughly, 8 months later, we have come to a point where it's at its highest point ever. And this is following, like I said, Joe Biden and also the vaccine. So altogether, these things have helped our economy somewhat recover in terms of the stock market. On top of that, people expect the economy to take a newer shape following a newly elected Joe Biden in the White House coming January 2021. And also, I don't think that this really plays into President Trump's sort of idea that as soon as Joe Biden takes office, that the economy is going to be somehow in shambles. And, when you're talking about people not really trusting Joe Biden, some people on the right, Republican surrogates on the news media, were saying that if Joe Biden is elected, the markets are going to plummet. The markets aren't going to respond favorably to a Joe Biden presidency, but it looks as if they are. And that argument seems to be invalidated by these new numbers. And while, the average American doesn't really care much about the stock market, you do have to realize that this isn't going to be this message that can be played if the numbers aren't exactly working in the favor of Donald Trump and his I wouldn't refer to it as his campaign, I guess his surrogates. His campaign seems to be over. He may run in 2024. We don't know. But this entire idea that Joe Biden would somehow ruin the economy immediately if he is elected just because of the reaction from traders. But once he enters into the White House, it's going to be a lot more difficult for Donald Trump to and the Republicans to build this message if Joe Biden actually just continues what has been happening for the past 12 years. So Donald Trump's approval amongst the economy has always been positive, really. I mean, the American people generally approve of the way that he's handling the economic situation. There were small periods of time where his approval rating amongst the economy was double digits, but generally the American distaste for him as a candidate or as a person really hinder his ability to overcome these margins in even the economy. But you can see around here, the overall average was a net negative. I'm not entirely sure why that was. I would expect it to happen sometime around the COVID-19 situation, if we can go ahead and find it, right around here. But I guess people approved of the way that he was handling the situation, and also a lot of what he was doing, a lot of what he pushed on the American people was in turn trying to save the United States economy, but also others were arguing that public health was more important than the short-term economy. But again, that has just been a long-standing debate between both political parties. But overall, I mean, Donald Trump's approval rating amongst the economy has been pretty high. His job approval, however, has not been pretty high. And throughout the entirety of the campaign season, he's pushed on this message that Joe Biden is a socialist. Joe Biden is going to ruin the American economy. He's going to get rid of all of these things that Donald Trump claims that he put in place. And honestly, following a lot of what we've seen, first of all, Biden's economic plan doesn't exactly seem like it's going to change much. Joe Biden said it at the debate that his tax cuts, even though he did say that he would be removing all of Trump's tax cuts, I think what he meant to say was that he would be removing certain ones. It just seemed like he wasn't exactly speaking correctly at that point or really conveying what he meant to convey. But overall, Biden's economic plan probably won't put him in the negative. I think both of these presidents will go down in history as being viewed favorably in terms of how they handled the economy. And this Dow Jones market going up really shows that the stock markets didn't crash following Joe Biden being elected president. Now, around this point, you saw that this was election day. This was around the election period, and people were getting a little uncertain about how the future would go. And if Donald Trump was to be elected, or if Joe Biden was to be elected, there was always that possibility that the markets would crash in response to an election. But following Joe Biden's election, we saw the market start to jump up, and after the transition began, the market hit the highest point ever in its entire history. If we go out to the max here, you can actually see, once it actually loads, that this is the highest it's ever been. And really, that's how a market should be in terms of constantly gaining. But at the same time, you do have to acknowledge that this is a pretty significant feat. And it's not just on the back of Joe Biden. You also have to discuss the possibility that the idea of a coronavirus vaccine being distributed possibly even as early as next month, according to Dr. Fauci, that this could also be driving the markets in a certain way. But Joe Biden's coronavirus task force and him naming people to the White House cabinet and the transition officially underway, all of it combined has really helped the market recover to where it was, or actually not really where it was, to the highest point it's ever been. But it doesn't necessarily play into Donald Trump's rhetoric that Joe Biden's election would somehow ruin the stock market, or that his presidency might do the same, because not only here are we seeing jumps in terms of the markets, but also in the financial indexes, the energy indexes. These are things that are maybe not super important to the regular American, to be completely honest with you. A lot of them aren't voting solely on the issue of the stock market, even if it may be in their brain. But this also is just a major playing point for both sides. They both love to label each other as bad for the economy. And at this point, I really just don't see that rhetoric sort of coming off from either candidate. I mean, this time, the only time the Biden campaign really went on the offense on Donald Trump on the economy was during COVID-19, when the economy was at the worst point it's ever been in a little bit under a century. And that was obviously because of the closures. That was because of the restrictions that a lot of these states had. But at the same time, public health does actually come first. And while some people may be safe compared to others, relatively safe, nobody's entirely safe from this virus, a lot of these governors made that harsh decision. Were they to shut down non-essential businesses? Were they not? It really all came down to what they wanted to do for their constituents and what their constituents wanted them to do. But for COVID-19, that was the only real time where we saw the Biden campaign go full on the offense about Donald Trump. And anytime he brought up the prior to COVID economy, the Biden campaign really shifted that focus and said, this is a result of actually Barack Obama's economy. So either way that Donald Trump really wanted to go to the economy, the Biden campaign had a response. But I see why now. A lot of people are worried about the economy specifically, and also why that was a major playing point for the Biden campaign. But following, if the vaccine is distributed, let's say by June 2021, and everyone has one, and COVID-19 seems to be in the past, the economy will likely recover to where it was before. And also, it's probably going to be much less of a playing point considering how difficult, how bad the economy was just a year prior, 2 years prior. And the Biden campaign is going to have a really good selling point entering into this administration with a broken economy that, regardless of who was in, if a vaccine was out, it's very possible the economy could have recovered in a very similar fashion. But, the incumbent party is going to take credit for that, and that's going to be a major playing point for the Democrats. So I don't really think that's going to be something huge that we're going to be discussing in the future unless something goes completely wrong. But also, like I said, none of the numbers so far are playing into that idea. So there's this poll that comes out pretty often where they discuss how worried Americans are about the economy. You can find this on the 538 website. They track how worried Americans are compared to catching the virus versus the economy. And the majority of Americans, overwhelming majority of Americans, are more concerned about the economy than they are about getting the virus. And that probably makes sense. I mean, when we're talking about the groups that are traditionally or disproportionately affected by COVID-19 in terms of death rates are the older population. And for those who are between 18 and 65 that are answering these polls, that see that their age group has a 0.005% death rate or a 0.01% death rate, they probably aren't going to be too afraid of the virus. And they're probably going to respond that they're more worried about the economy. They're more worried about getting into the job market. I discussed why Donald Trump could have done better amongst a significant age group between, I believe, 30s to mid 40s. And the reason for that is because, part of the reason could be due to COVID-19, due to the closures, that some of these voters may view the virus as really a non-threat because they are young, because they aren't exposed to it really. They aren't affected by it as much as the older generation. They may view it as something that they really do not want to be worried about. They're more worried about a job market, which they relatively entered in, relatively new to the job market, and they may be worried more about their job security, maybe worried about their small businesses not being able to open because they're, quote, non-essential. A lot of these things could have pushed this demographic, which traditionally votes very much to the left compared to the older generation. But this time, they actually shifted in favor of Donald Trump by 4 points compared to 2016. That could be a response of COVID-19 and a number of other factors, but the economy seems to be an issue that a lot of Americans care about. And in terms of how Americans view the economy, 53.2% are very worried about the economy through COVID-19. 32.2% are somewhat worried. So barely, not even 15% of Americans say they're not worried, not at all, or not very worried about the economy. So it looks like this is an issue that's really important to Americans. But following, the COVID vaccine, which is set to be released early time, maybe December at the latest, springtime 2021. But also the transition seems to be quelling the minds of a lot of traders and building the market back up to a point where it really has never been. And this 30,000 points is going to be a major playing point for the Democrats, I think. But also, once we recover back to an economy that's even vaguely similar to where it was pre-COVID, I don't think that this is going to be too much of a discussion. Yes, the economy is super important to the American people, and I think that at some point it will come back up. But in Biden's first term, I don't think that people are going to be, or maybe his only term, we don't know yet, I don't think people are going to be fully focused on the economy from the right just because it's going to look very good for Biden regardless of when the economy recovers, because it inevitably will, that's going to be a selling point for the Democrats, and they're going to want to avoid that. Donald Trump's major selling point prior to COVID was the economy. He still likes to talk about it now, but it clearly did not work and clearly did not win him the presidency, and especially in the Rust Belt where a lot of these areas were hit hard by COVID, and the Democratic governors there did close down a lot of the states, closed down a lot of the businesses, but they also said that there were reasons for that, and a lot of those governors there are approved of, and Donald Trump is not. So the messaging didn't exactly play too well during a global pandemic. If COVID had not been in the situation, I think the economy message would have been much better because the economy was in a very good position prior to COVID-19, but I think that the Republican Party is probably going to lay off from this economy message, given that Biden's administration is likely to take over at a very low point and inevitably reach a high point. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2020 post-election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.